Well, hello. Thank you so much for finding time for me, Rachel. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited to talk to you too. It's so nice to e-chat, e-meet.
Yeah, I know. Especially if you've been following someone on social media. I mean, I was
Yeah.
watching your stories lately, and I'm very jealous of all your travels. You go to so many amazing places in China. Like, I feel like you go to a lot of unique places, right?
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things about traveling in China. And I'm sure we'll chat into more of that. But the big cities are great and a lot of the more well-known places. But some of my favorite places have been those smaller, lesser known places, some little villages in the middle of nowhere. I think China is so unique in that way that you can have the big and the famous places, but also these unknown destinations. So that's really cool for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, China is so huge. Like, it's basically endless sea of
Yeah.
travel opportunities, I guess.
Yes, it's got everything too, the mountains, the deserts, everything in between. So it's great.
So let's start from the beginning. How did you even start your journey with China? How did you even come up with the idea of moving to China?
So I was about to graduate from university and I was thinking, what do I want my next steps to be? I studied marketing and media and I was thinking about taking a job in the States right after I graduated. But part of me was also I don't know if I'm ready to settle down. I don't know if I want to jump into my career right away. I've always wanted to travel and do more with that. Because I studied abroad when I was a student. I went to Greece and a bit over Europe. And I was just wow, that was a really great experience. I'd love to do that again, but for a longer time. And there was a program at my school to go teach English in China. And at first it was China, it was not a place I ever really thought of going. It wasn't at the top of my list. Just for a lot of people, I don't think it's the first place that you're
Yeah, yeah.
China, it didn't cross my mind. I didn't have a negative or bad idea really about it. I just didn't know anything about it. But there was a program to go teach. Yeah, I think most people were I don't know. So I went to teach for a year. I also had some university friends who were Chinese students, who were studying at my school. And so meeting some of them as well really helped me wrap my mind more around the idea of moving to China and just having that close connection that I could ask questions and just feel a little bit closer to learn more about it before I went. So that was another big thing that was all right, I'm going to pack my bags and move to China, I guess, for a year. And I
And
did it.
you went to a city in south of China, right? It's
Yeah.
it's smaller. What was the name of the city again?
So it's called Hanyang, and it's this small city in Hunan province, 45 minutes outside of Changsha, which is the province capital. So, I mean, I say small. It's small by China standards. There's still 2 million people in it. But for
Oh,
American standards, it's huge, But in China, it's oh, only 2 million
okay.
people.
Again, typical. I Googled it yesterday and I was like, oh, there are not that many. There are barely any pictures on Google. A small town.
Yeah, you really can't find anything there. It's it'll show you one park that you can visit. And it's woo, visit our park here in this city. That's about it.
And you stayed there for a year, right?
I stayed there for a year, but I loved it. It was a really great first year experience actually in China. I mean, it was really hard. In some ways, of course, the culture shock, the language. There was a lot of difficulties in wrapping your mind around it. But I was kind of at that point where I was ready to jump into something new. And I taught university students, and that was amazing because the university students they could speak English, they could help me order things on Taobao. They were there just to help guide me and hold my hand a little bit when I was trying to figure everything out. And I loved the small city too. It was a really unique experience because it wasn't oh, I can just, go to the Great Wall and pop over or I didn't do a lot of that stuff in the beginning. It was more just let's go to a Chinese little market and, haggle. I mean, I guess you could do that in every city, but there was a lot of unique, smaller cultural experiences that I tried. That was just really cool. I really focused on a lot of my Chinese friends and made friendships with them and went to their hometowns, met their parents and their families. And I think that was kind of I think I really like it here. There's so much more to see and so much more than I thought there was going to be, and it kind of just got me more curious to stay longer. So I ended up staying there and teaching for another year in that small city.
So you stayed there for 2 years and then you moved on. But wait, before we move to this part of your experience, so how did your family and friends from back home reacted when you told them that you will be moving to China? Because you're originally from Texas, right?
Yes, I'm from Texas. Yeah. I think it was just people didn't have really any idea about it. I think it was just kind of this far off mystical place. It was China, I think my family really didn't have negative opinions about it or negative feelings about me going. I think if I had been going anywhere in Asia or that far away for a year, they would have still had concerns about like, are you going to be safe? Like, what's the environment going to be like? Like, what's going to happen if an emergency happens? But I used to also get interesting questions from people like friends, other people who just didn't know much either. They'd be like, does China have Wi-Fi? Like, how are you going to communicate with your family and friends back home? You know, things like that. And it sounds silly now looking back at that because we're like, yeah, China is super high tech. And of course they have Wi-Fi. Like, that's crazy. But I think there's just this idea of, or maybe no idea. There's a lot of misconceptions or just stereotypes about it. Like even before I came, I didn't know how to use chopsticks either. So that was a big thing that it was just jumping into a different culture that I was not aware of. And my family really didn't have any much idea about it either. So I think they were just mostly worried, are you going to be safe? Are you going to be okay?
So you moved to south of China first, and then after 2 years, you decided, no, you actually extended your stay. You were supposed to stay for only 1 year, then you extended.
Yes.
Did you, because by now you've been in China for like 5-6 years, right?
6 years now this month in August. And that's crazy because I did plan to stay for just 1 year. Like, I'm going to go teach abroad for a year and then go back home and, you know, do my thing or whatever. And now it's like, oh, it's 6 years now. I think that's a thing that happens a lot with people in China, though. You're like, I'm going to go for 1 year. And then you end up just finding more opportunities and there's more to do, more that you want to see. And then it's been like 5 years and you're like, wow.
So you lived in 3 different places in China, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I started in Hunan province. I loved Hunan province. The food is so good. Spicy food. Love it. And then I moved to Guangzhou for 1 year. So after teaching for 2 years at the university, I thought, you know, I want to stay in China longer, but I want to live in a different city and do a different style of teaching. So I moved to Guangzhou, which is a really, really big city, as you know. And then I started teaching at kindergarten. So it was a very totally different experience, which was really interesting because I was like, wow, I thought I had certain ideas of what it's like living in China. And then living in a different city was just like, wow, it was totally different. And it was challenging still in some ways. Like there was, you know, I think as we all know, living in China, there's good days and there's bad days. You know, there's China days where it's just like, wow, this is tough. I'm having, you know, just the hardest day trying to just order something, pick up my Wi-Fi, you know, just like little things like that, things, or even big things, trying to arrange a visa, a big scale of things. But overall, it was such a good experience, and I loved living in Guangzhou as well. It was really cool to be in a bigger city for a year in Guangzhou.
And then you decided to move to Beijing. So why did you decide to leave Guangzhou and move to Beijing?
It was another thing where I was like, okay, I did 1 year of teaching kindergarten, and mad props to kindergarten teachers. Like that is an intense job, and it is just so full on with energy. And I loved it. I loved the kids and everything, but I studied media and marketing. And so I was like, well, I want to stay in China longer, but I also don't want to continue teaching. That's not like what my passion is. I want to get back into what I studied at school and find a way to do that in China. And during that time, you know, I'd started my blog and done Rachel Meets China. I'd slowly started building that up to start working with a few brands and just doing like part-time with freelance work, writing, stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, I'm really excited about doing this and I want to continue doing this more. And luckily I got a offer. Oh, hi. That's my cat.
Is that a cat?
Yeah, do you want to say hi? Hi,
I love cats.
Hi. She's like, I want to be on the video.
Cute.
Like, okay. That's enough. So a company reached out to me actually through Instagram, and they were like, you know, it was an education recruitment company. So it was all working with teachers, helping teachers come to China, and they were like, we need somebody for our media and marketing team, and you've got experience teaching and traveling and just working with other people who know about the experience. Would you want to come do more like marketing and media for us? So I moved to Beijing, and
so contacted you. They found you on social media.
They found me. Yeah, so that was really cool.
Because that's the cool thing when you work for it. I mean, you obviously worked on your social media, and then something like else good came out of it, right?
Yes, absolutely. It was like interesting, like, you know, the doors that can open, and like it was a really awesome experience and such a blessing too. Like I felt so grateful that I could do more of that, and because I loved, you know, doing more on Instagram, and so having that connection made from that was really interesting. And also at first I was like, Beijing, I don't know if I want to move to Beijing. I visited Beijing like once my first year, And just coming here as a visitor is tough because it's a huge city. Things are spread out. It takes you forever to get around. Traffic's awful. And it used to be pretty smoggy. I just kind of was like, oh, it's great. I'm glad I visited there, but I don't know if I would ever want to live in Beijing. And then I ended up moving here for the job, and I love it. I think it's totally different living in Beijing rather like and not being a tourist here. Because you kind of find your community, you find the places that you want to go to, you have your neighborhood places, you have really great friend groups and activities and all kinds of things that you can join that really make it feel like home. Included with all the cultural fun stuff, the Forbidden City and the Great Wall and Temple of Heaven. So you've got this great mix of all of this stuff. I think it's great.
No, definitely. I mean, I can imagine that living in Beijing is very different than visiting.
Yes.
I didn't like both with Shanghai, also Bangkok. When those big cities in Asia, they can be so overwhelming. So I totally
Yes.
understand that when you visit, you don't even see why people would ever want to live there because it's so overwhelming. But once you live there, it changes.
Definitely. Is that how you felt in Shanghai? Was it like, whoa, this city is huge?
I hated Shanghai at first. And now I'm like the biggest Shanghai lover. Now I'm like,
Yes.
the best city on earth. And when I first
love it.
yeah, after 3 days, I was like seriously considering going back home. Like I had a serious conversation with my mom came with me to Shanghai the first time. I was really young. It was right after high school. It was like 2 months after I graduated high school. I went to China, and I've never been. So yeah, and after 3 days, I was like, "Oops, that was a mistake." Why did I? Yeah,
I need to get on the next flight home.
Yeah, we had a very serious conversation where she was like, "You can still go back home. We can still figure it out." I was so scared.
Were you so close? Were you like, oh, tempting?
Coming from Copenhagen, that is so different. Like it's more calm. I mean, it's smaller. It's like 1 million people, and Shanghai, it's so huge and like it's so
ginormous. Yes, absolutely. That's definitely how I felt moving to Beijing. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many districts all over, and all these districts are so big, they could be their own city,
Yeah.
Luckily, I found a great community, but also like the hutongs. Did you go to the hutongs when you visited Beijing?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. Of course, everybody has to go to the hutongs, but I actually lived in a hutong for like 2 years, and that was a really interesting experience as well. Because you're like, kind of in this local Chinese neighborhood. So if you guys know what a hutong is, like it's the old style Beijing homes, and they have these little alleyways and the Siheyuan. So that's a really cool experience. I'd like, open up my door every day, and it's like, little Chinese families and kids running around. So it kind of kept that small local feeling that I loved from the small city I lived in first. And I kind of could keep that feeling living in such a big city like Beijing.
That sounds really cool. It's like Nico as well, right? She lives in a
Yeah. I'm actually going to see her later today.
Oh, no way. Say hi.
Yeah. And we used to like work near each other, and we can like hang out, meet up for like lunch. We used to do like Mala time Monday. She's great.
That's so nice. Would you ever move somewhere else in China? Is there any other place in China that you would consider as your next home potential?
There are two places. I mean, for me, having starting in a small city in China, I think, and then moving to bigger cities now, it would be really hard for me to go back the other way and like move back to a small city, just because living in Beijing, you have all the conveniences of big city life. And so I think for me, the next place I would go would either be Shanghai, talked about that and thought about it, or Chengdu. I love Sichuan. I love spicy food. And Chengdu is such a great city because it's a little bit more laid back, more chill. You don't have this like crazy big hustle life, the way that you kind of feel in Beijing.
Only 20 million people instead of 20.
Yeah, exactly. So it's much smaller. So that would be a great place. I would love to be somewhere west. Like if I hadn't moved to Beijing 3 years ago, I was thinking about moving to Sichuan, like either Chongqing or Chengdu in Sichuan. And also you're so close to like nature. There's so many great nature parks, hiking. I'm a big fan of hiking in China. And so I would have loved to kind of be centered over there. But I think if I were going to move somewhere else after this, it would actually be Shanghai. And it's a great home base for traveling in China too, because I would still want to be traveling a lot. And so if you're kind of in the center of China, you can kind of move around a bit.
True, true. And it's always so cool to travel by train in China. Like I hate traveling by train in Europe. Like it's so slow. And whenever I travel, I think back about China. You know, if we would be in China, this would take like 1/10 of the time.
Yes, that is the best thing about China is the public transportation. Because in the States, we don't have any of that anyways. Like everybody has cars, we drive everywhere. We don't really have trains or high-speed trains. Like it's just really way worse when you think about it compared to China. I love the Gautier. It's awesome.
So being American in China, have you ever experienced people having any like set mindset of how Americans should be, both maybe positive and negative?
Yeah, it definitely was interesting because when I taught university students, they definitely had ideas and kind of not maybe some stereotypes about what Americans were like, and just because the movies, the media, like that stuff is really really big here. So I remember my students used to ask me like really funny questions all the time, like, "Oh, do you know Taylor Swift?" And like, "Do you have her phone number? Can you call her?" Things like that. Or they found out that I'm from Texas, so they'd ask me if I know like or if I've seen Yao Ming play, or like if I like NBA. So there were some like fun connections they could make with me because I was American, and because my students were very young and like interested in English language and wanting to learn a lot of that stuff. So I received a lot of positivity in that regard. But there was definitely some like weird sides or negative sides. When I first moved to Hanyang, I tried Tantan, which is the Chinese Tinder. And so that was an interesting experience because most guys would have this idea about American girls. And they would be like, "Oh, you're an American girl, so you must be very open, right?" And just kind of assumptions like that because they've seen like a lot of our TV shows. Like somebody was like, "Oh, is your life like Gossip Girl?" They just imagine we might be like dating around and sleeping around and very promiscuous, very open. So that was a thing that I had to say, okay, that's a thing I got asked quite a lot. And I was like, oh. And there's also just like the things when you get in taxis, like, the taxi drivers love having conversations with you and they'll always ask, "Oh, you're from America. How old are you? Yo, nampanyo ma?" Like, want to know, do you have a boyfriend? And so that's an interesting thing that you can kind of get a glimpse into what some Chinese people might think about Americans. Um, but overall, it's been okay. There have been different waves, of course, as well, especially when COVID started happening, and there were certain lockdowns, and certain places got a little bit strange with foreigners, putting up signs, "No foreigners allowed." But I guess that was something that we all experienced, not just with being Americans, but like foreigners from anywhere. There's definitely been a range of experiences being, a foreigner living here.
What about the other way around? What are some of the funniest or weirdest assumptions or like misconceptions you heard from Americans or from, friends back home about China?
Um, I mean, there's always the cliches about like, "Oh, does everybody there know kung fu?" Like, jokes like that. Or like, "Is your life like Mulan?" I think that was the biggest thing. My friends that was their only reference for China, was basing it off like Disney movies or like Jackie Chan movies. So they just kind of imagined, "Oh, is that what your life is going to be like? And like, what can you expect? And are you going to be doing Tai Chi all the time?" And they just had a really interesting concept in that way. Like, did your family ask you those kind of things as well? Or your friends back home?
I guess, they always ask about food, if like I only, had to eat rice all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Or like if it's dangerous. I think people often think that like Shanghai is a dangerous city.
My family or some of my friends, like they were like, "Oh, I think they had this idea it was going to be like North Korea here, and that people were just going to be like marching around in lines all the time, and
Yeah,
that
that's a
security
thing.
was going to be really weird." So
Yeah,
that's
people ask,
also
like, the typical thing, like, did I feel free in China? Or,
yes. Oh, yes. Always, yeah. Always that. And also just questions about navigating, VPNs and like, because that was the biggest thing I always heard before I came as well. It was like the big firewall, it's like, how do you access Facebook and, Google and stuff?
climb through the fire.
I made it.
So, what would you say are your favorite things about China and your least favorite things about China?
Ooh.
Like living in China.
Ooh. Okay, living in China. Oh my gosh, just one of the best things I love is the convenience of the technology here is amazing. Like you can use your apps and WeChat for everything. booking tickets, buying things, Taobao, like everything is so convenient and at your fingertips. Or booking train tickets, everything is just super quick, super easy. It's almost bad though how easy it is. I buy too many things on Taobao now, and it's like, oh, I should stop.
Yeah, that's what
But I just I love that convenience of that. And also, yeah, just the train system, the traveling like we were talking about. I think my favorite thing about living here is the opportunity to go to so many places. It's so surprising. I actually didn't travel a lot in the States. I was a student or I was studying all the time or I didn't have money, to travel when I was younger. So it's kind of afforded me the life that I can, take the time to travel or see a lot of places and go a lot of places that I wouldn't be able to. And to have the convenient train system and that kind of stuff has just been amazing. But there's so many great things. I mean, the people are also really great. I've made so many amazing friendships here, like Chinese friends or students that I taught 5 years ago that I'm still in touch with now. Those kind of connections that like have really shaped or changed my time in China.
And what do you dislike?
There are definitely things that are just like challenging or inconvenient at times. I mean, a big part of it is because my Chinese is still, not a good level, and I know my life would be a lot easier if I spoke better Chinese. But I think there's also just a cultural shift that you have to think about. The community here and how it's more of a collective group. I think it was hard at first when I was teaching students and used to a very maybe a Western mindset of like critical thinking and independence, doing things for yourself. And it was a big shift that I had to like learn to switch into this like, oh, my students would like want to help each other cheat on exams. That was one time that happened, but it was like, oh, well, we just want to help each other out. That was so one kind of experience. But there's just things that I've had to shift your mind around and learn a lot of like, they always say like, like, no, why? Sometimes they have like these crazy like bureaucratic rules or systems with your job, frustrating things that you're just like, why is this like this? I don't understand this system. I don't understand why it's not easier for me to do this thing that I'm trying to do. And it's just like, no, why? And you just kind of have to accept it.
Thank you so much for finding time to do this, Rachel. And tell us, where can people find you?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. You can follow me on Instagram and YouTube, Rachel Meets China. I also have a blog, so I write travel guides and share photos and places that I've been traveling around China. So you can follow me there.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great chatting with you.